Hey, everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Strangers Worth Meeting podcast. Today on the show, I've got Spencer Schaffner with me, and I'm hanging out right now in central Illinois, where I found Spencer does a lot of various work around Urbana, kind of a Renaissance man. So I'm excited to get to talk to him about all those different things. Spencer, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me and for reaching out.
Absolute pleasure. We're doing the show remote again today, everybody, because we're still just in this strange, ethereal COVID. What's going on? Are we second waving kind of thing right now? How's that affecting your life, Spencer?
I mean, it's been huge. I feel like I'm adapting to this kind of new reality, but yeah, it's thrown a wrench in the works for sure in a million different ways. And I was thinking about your podcast. I mean, your whole podcast is about like this intimate meeting with someone, and here we are doing it virtually. But I think it can be done. It's got to be possible.
I think I've had some really good experiences with some of the virtual guests I've had on. And also, I did get the chance recently to meet up with a guest who I had on originally virtually, and then we did get to the chance to meet up and do
Oh yeah,
sort of a live recording. So
I
that
heard
just
that one.
changes it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
basically like I'm making just like a wait list of all these cool people I get to hang out with after this whole thing's over. So I
Yeah.
see it as a big win for me in the end.
Yeah.
Um, but luckily, I have a bit more context about you than I even get for some people because you have got a YouTube channel. It's all Meta Spencer. That's what you call kind of everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
So I got to watch some of your videos and see some of the stuff you do. I have an idea of how to describe you, but I think it's just more fair to let you do it for yourself. So
Oh
how would
boy.
you describe all these various things that you get up to?
Well, I think the thing about me is that I haven't really specialized in life. I'm pushing 50, but I've never really specialized. Some people they find a niche and that's just the thing that they do. But I'm not that person, and I think I struggled for a long time to, really find like a specialty and just kind of dig in that hole for a long time. But instead, I'm just always changing what I do. So I make a lot of stuff. I was a professor for a long time. I've worked in different kind of business worlds and that kind of thing. And right now, I'm running my own business here in town, and that keeps changing because of this dang pandemic. So I can't really put a finger on the one thing I do, but if there's anything, I try to think that I create creative projects of different kinds.
I'm so glad you even described it that way because I think I feel the exact same way. I feel like I'm kind of good at a lot of different things and I'm not super good at any one thing
Any one
at
thing, right?
all.
Right.
Um, but I feel like more people feel that way than we talk about. Like
That could
ultimately
be,
the
yeah,
number of true masters out there at any one thing, that's a slim range, We're all
yeah,
just
yeah,
we've all acquired a number of different skills as we just go on. But
yeah. And I don't think it has to
primarily,
be a
yeah,
limitation. I think it can be a real
no,
asset to have a variety of things you can do, but it can be seen as a limitation. But anyway,
I completely agree with you. I think some days you struggle with it though, because some days you
oh
want to
yeah,
be really good at this one thing that you're like totally obsessed with at the moment, and you're
yeah.
just not that good at
And you're just not,
it.
yeah, yeah,
And that just happens.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so hopefully we can get into kind of a lot of those different things that you've done. I have literally no end to the various things we can talk about on the show today, which is
Cool.
always nice for me. I don't even hardly have to dig. But I went down kind of a rabbit hole watching all of your YouTube videos this morning, and there's just such a wide range of things that you do and talk about, and that's pretty cool. I saw even today you were posting at the time of this recording, at least you're posting about removing a dead tree out there in Urbana,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
which for anybody who doesn't love heights, it was pretty cool to watch from the GoPro as you start going up this tree, and
yeah,
you're just doing that with like one rope around the tree and then like some spikes on your shoes to
yeah,
help you with the
yeah,
purchase.
yeah. Most of my work, I try to keep it simple. I mean, I've got a million tools, but I do believe that you can, keep a lot of jobs simple. And with tree removal, which I've started doing here in town, you can have a $100,000 bucket truck and a crane and all that stuff. But like you saw in the video, I just do it with a set of spurs and a rope and a saw. And I can't do every tree, but I get the job done usually. So
Is that sort of how classic lumberjack tree climbing works,
I
or is
guess
this
if you took a classic lumberjack and then you sort of transformed that person into a middle-aged dude in a town in the Midwest,
sure?
maybe, maybe, yeah, I don't know.
Well, why?
Yeah,
So I'm hanging out in Champaign right now. I mentioned to you that this is my family's from around this area. So
right,
I
right,
grew up as a young child in Mahomet, which is where we're kind of hanging out now. And then I moved to Monticello around middle school and did middle school and high school in Monticello. And I even went to college out in Decatur at Millikin.
oh, okay.
Um, so I'm very familiar with this area. It's actually Andrea and I are real excited just to be here for a month because we just needed some time to step away. We literally just drove from Seattle to Charleston for work,
Right,
and
right,
then came here, and so we've been doing too much driving, and we're missing our family a lot. So we're spending a little time with family, and that's been so great for us.
nice.
Um, but how did you find yourself ended up in this in the Champbana area, as they call it?
It was by accident. I was living in Seattle, and before then I had kind of lived in a big series of like cool towns, like the places where people move because it's awesome. I was in Portland, I was out in Boston, I grew up in Boulder, I was in Santa Fe, and Champaign-Urbana is not a place where people just arrive because they heard it was awesome. It's just not that kind of place. But I got a job here at the university. I did my PhD out in Seattle and got a job as a professor. So I was like, dude, it seems like a good job and it's an affordable place to live and that kind of thing. So yeah, I moved out here, met my wife, and we've been here for 15 years. And I quit my job at the university about 2 years ago, something like that.
I like how you were following all the hipster cities just across the
I
country,
really
man.
was.
I feel
Yeah.
like you just missed Austin, and then you would have been absolutely
Yep.
golden.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
I think Champaign-Urbana has a pretty hipster vibe to it as well, and I can
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
attest to that. At the Andrew and I went to the farmers market this morning, and it very much. I mean, it's a big farmers market, by the way, the
Oh
Urbana
yeah.
one,
Yeah.
and it was actually pretty great. We I'm hoping that my last podcast guest, Mike Gillette, is listening in on this because we talked about getting farm fresh foods. So, Mike, I got a bunch of good beef and even got some chicken wings and a bunch of great
Nice.
vegetables. So there you go.
Yeah, there's
Um,
definitely all that stuff going on in town. We just don't have like a mountain or ocean or any of that kind of,
yeah,
that kind
I
of stuff.
think you're right, but at the same time, now that I've gone out to so many different towns, Andrew and I, on our travels, I do think this place is kind of special, and I feel like the big key thing is both the university and also the forest preserve because the parks around here are phenomenal.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Lake of the Woods Park here, which is I just grew up literally right across the street
Yeah,
from that
really
park.
pretty. Yeah.
Amazing, and Allerton Park, of course, out in Monticello, where I went to high school. That's managed by the university, and just another awesome place, just in the middle of nowhere. You totally don't expect it, but I
Yeah.
feel like that gives a lot of good reason to like want to stick around here to have all these excellent parks. Really, really big shout out to Champaign County on that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But anyway, to go back, so as a professor, so what was it that you were teaching at the time?
I was in the English department and I had a job I was a professor of writing studies. So I focused on like new media stuff, like teaching students how to make websites and similar to like the way we started this conversation, I didn't really have a specialty. Like I wrote a couple books on different topics and just worked on a lot of different stuff that interests me. And just over the years, just decided that it was time for me to move on and do some other stuff.
And I saw one of your books that intrigued me particularly because it was something about writing as a punishment. Am I
Yeah,
getting that
yeah.
right? What is the premise there?
That was my last one, and I got interested as a teacher. I was working in the Seattle public schools, like in the late '90s, and I got interested in a teacher, in the way that students will be, disciplined by having to write an essay or write something over and over again. And I just got kind of fascinated by that. I taught about it for a long time. I discovered in my research that a lot of judges use that kind of punishment in their courts. And there's all kinds of other like kind of funky deviant practices involving writing on people's bodies, either through forced tattooing or just with like a pen and ink. So it sort of kind of became a book. So it was a fascination. It was just like one of those things that I was just really curious, like why in the heck are we using writing to punish people?
Right.
And like you were saying about rabbit hole, like I just went down that rabbit hole of exploring it.
Does it did you kind of discover that like leads to people having sort of a reticence about writing overall, and maybe
I
like
think I think that that's the typical premise about writing as punishment. Like it turns people off to writing. But the focus of my book is more just about how many of us tend to imagine that writing has a really deep power to transform people. So you can actually force and impose a disposition on somebody by having them write about something or write in a certain way, as opposed to speak in a certain way or paint or dance or sing songs or something. There's just like this real belief in literacy as like deeply transformative and almost so powerful that you can't resist it. So in the end, the book wasn't really about like like this is. I wasn't saying like this is a really screwy thing and we should stop doing this, which a lot of other people have said. Like we got to stop punishing kids this way. But instead,
Mhm.
I was just exploring it because I think it's wild. It's just a wild thing that across cultures and actually for hundreds of years, writing's been used as punishment and discipline and to shame people and make a mockery of them in public and all kinds of stuff.
That is super interesting. Is there something there about like about literacy? Like maybe it's like it developed as something you could either do or you could not do, and that determined like your status somehow?
I
Or am
think
I dreaming?
so. Yeah. In fact, a number of the court cases I looked at, like the legal documents I looked at, you end up having these punishments meted out by judges to their literate people in their courts. Like, hey, if you're a literate person, you can write me a book report. But then if you're not a literate person, you don't have that option. So there's definitely some privilege built into it. It's funky, it's a funky thing, and it goes on. There's sort of a belief that the use of writing as punishment has vanished in our schools, but I hear all the time, from we got a younger kid who's still in school that is still being used. Kids are still having to write forced essays or letters of apology or all kinds of things.
That's super interesting. Yeah, that book really grabbed my attention. I see what you mean too. It's almost like this pen is mightier than the sword thing, but also we kind of believe that like the pen is mightier than even
Is
just
yeah,
speaking.
yeah. One of the phrases I kind of developed in the research was that we sort of believe that as we write on the page, we're physically written upon, like back on our consciousness, and I just saw that in example after example.
Do you think that's why things like email and social media seem to be just so much more heated than when you're having just a conversation with someone? Like I tend to find I run a marketing agency, and occasionally a client will be upset about something, and
Oh
I
yeah,
completely understand because hey, I'm not perfect. But then when I say let's get on the phone, we get on the phone, and then it's two humans working together to solve something, as opposed to feeling so confrontational to each other. I'm sure people have the same experience. I don't mean to sound like this is a unique
oh
experience,
yeah,
but
oh yeah.
I feel like there is definitely some huge connection there with meeting people. That's why I'm not doing like a book of interviews. I do a podcast instead
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
because
there's
it's
not.
just
I
not the
mean, there's
same.
there's so much to hearing somebody's voice and having a little bit of laughter to realize that there's some rapport and connection with the person you're talking with, and it's so easy in a text message or whatever or an email just to misinterpret someone or to just interpret a nuance in what they're saying and kind of blow it out of proportion. It just happens all the time.
I think you're right, and I wish it was not that way. And
Yeah, but it happens, right? It
yeah,
happens.
it
Yeah,
truly does, and
yeah,
it's something I think about probably way too much. But specifically since I started doing more and more podcasting, it became even more clear to me that there's just so much more to connecting with someone that you don't know,
yeah,
than
yeah,
can be expressed in any type of writing.
yeah,
Uh, it's absolutely wild. So
yeah.
I've gotten so far afield here, which is good. That's my goal. Um, but okay, the so you've shifted away from this, so I probably shouldn't be talking about that because now it's way more about building and crafting and working with your hands and the woodworking and so many different things. Um, do you have a scope of the various projects that you've done for people? I saw chicken coops and tree removals and a few other things. Like, do you set some sort of rules for what type of work you do and don't do, or you just wait and let the world show you what is the next project?
I kind of that's kind of a hard question to answer, but I've been like building and making stuff for forever, like at least 20, 30 years, something like that. And a lot of times for me, it has to do with a need, like, hey, we need some furniture in the house, or like my wife and I built our house, and it was because we got this cool piece of land and there was nothing on it, so it's like, okay, time to build a house. So sometimes it just has to do with the conditions of what's going on. But sometimes for me, it has to do with like what I have available. If I score some nice wood or some steel, for instance, this is kind of like a weird story, but a couple years ago, I was looking on Facebook, no, Craigslist, and I was looking for like a cool trailer to buy and maybe build a tiny house or something, and I ended up buying this kind of dilapidated prison bus
Oh
that had
yeah.
been used in the Illinois correctional system. And at the time, I was teaching just a little bit. I taught a couple classes at the Danville Correctional Facility, the prison over in Danville, and I
Were you
was I
making
was
people
working.
write for punishment? Was that what you were doing? Because that'd be
No, I
really
was
ironic.
not doing that. Yeah, I was really practicing it out on the guys. But I had a bunch of students I was working with, and they were all teaching the prison. Anyway, I ended up with this prison bus, and it was like, what was I going to do with this prison bus? And the answer was that I had to figure out like how to work with this giant metal object with an engine and wheels and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like the limits are always getting stretched just based on what I run into. Like right now we have a small farm, so I'm doing a lot more like farm related projects and construction and stuff like that. But I don't imagine that's going to last forever. Like at some point it'll be something else.
Yeah, the school bus thing is one that intrigues me a lot. I think it was there's a documentary on Netflix called Expedition Happiness, which is specifically
Oh
about two
yeah.
people who renovate a school bus. I'm sure you've seen it, and
Yeah, I've seen it.
it's a great documentary. And it was for Andrew and I one of the things that inspired us to get out on the road and do full time travel. Um, at the same time, the school bus as a thing, I wasn't a big fan. I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
like I like the setup we went with. I'm very much like team RV now,
So what
because
do
I
you
think
got?
it
You
was the
guys have an
right
RV
call.
or a van or what?
We have an RV. It's a trailer, so it
Okay.
pulls
Oh,
behind our
nice.
truck, and that's
Nice.
really useful for us with work because a lot of times we're traveling to our clients is one of the main reasons that we will go somewhere.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily want to show up with my house. You know what I mean? I don't want to pull I don't want to pull up in my house and give a house tour to everybody that I
Yeah.
work with. I
Yeah.
love them, but it's my house.
That's cool. Yeah.
So we can kind of just park it and then feel like normal people. Hey, we've got a truck and a motorcycle now, and
Yep.
go do whatever you want to do. That's worked out really well for me. The school bus is the thing that makes me the most nervous. Is probably not anything on the inside. I'm sure you can make them totally comfortable, awesome. They look great,
Oh yeah.
but I definitely think it's the engines that scare me. Like
Oh yeah.
I love that my engine is not a part of my home because
Yep.
if I need to
Yep.
go, and I have had to go get the truck fixed up, it doesn't affect my home at
Yep.
all. I
Yep.
don't have to move out for several days.
Yeah, that's like the
Um,
big vulnerability of, an RV with a classic RV, or with a bus conversion, or even a van conversion. I mean, you're dealing with like a living space and this domestic space, and you're thinking about the plumbing and the electrical system and everything, but then you've also got all the mechanics of the bus. And with these bus conversions, it's typically an old bus. It's
yeah,
rusty and the engine's been overhauled a couple times and all that kind of stuff. So it's it's a doozy of a thing to keep running. But I think the space in the buses is pretty cool. I mean, this is a 40
yeah.
foot bus, and it's got a million windows, and it's just kind of a cool space.
I totally agree with you. Some of those renovations are awesome. Obviously, the one in Expedition Happiness was incredible.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
what was the engine running when you got your bus, or did you have to pretty
It
much
it
scrap it?
ran right until I got it home. And then that thing just
Mm,
started having a million problems. And for me, that was cool because I have, learned a lot of things. I've done electrical work and plumbing and carpentry and stuff. But I wasn't a welder when I bought the bus, so I had to learn all my welding skills. And I also wasn't a mechanic. So I'm still learning how to maintain that bus mechanically. And so it's been a big learning experience.
I
It's been a lot of fun. I was going through some troubles, like I was having some health issues when I got the bus, and it was a way for me to kind of remember how great it is to build something and to have like a huge project that you can't finish in a week. It was
right.
just really awesome that way.
And did you complete that project? I don't know if I saw like finished pictures of the inside.
No, no,
Okay.
it's not. The inside's done, but I haven't painted the outside. I keep meaning to pull it out and do that, but now I got some dead batteries. I think finish is really a term that will never be applied to that bus.
For
It's
sure.
always going to have like a little something going on. And things that I did, now I'm looking at, I made one of those big like roof deck kind of things. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh, that needs to be tuned up a little bit. So yeah. So
What's
it's not really done. I don't know if it ever will be.
what's the plan? What's the plan if you get it, not definitely not done. I totally understand that
Yeah,
feeling, but
yeah.
operational, where's the travel destination, or is there a goal to live in it at all, or what's the idea?
Actually, the kind of weird thing for me was that the project was really about doing the conversion. And I think the plan is to pass it on to somebody else. I'm not a big RV kind of guy. I'm more of a backpacker and a camper, and I love to travel, but it's usually with a car or on a bicycle or on foot.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was really about the project. Like it was just this opportunity to take a prison bus, which was just the absolute opposite thing of a statement of freedom. It was like this incarceration space, cages and bad smells and just nasty memories and stuff, and to turn into something a little more positive and liberating.
Is
So
that I feel like that's a common element for you. I feel like you like to repurpose
yeah, yeah,
things and make
yeah.
them beautiful that are currently ugly.
Yeah, that's just my thing. I love that. Take some trash, like something by the side of the road, and make it great, or just even in some of the houses that I've rebooted over the years and refurbished. Just take a house that's fallen down and make it nice again. Um, it's just there's just something I find just intrinsically really valuable in that. So the bus has been an example of that, even if it's not done, even if it's
Yeah.
not totally done.
Yeah, I get that. And I also think, there are pros and cons to the lifestyle or even taking some temporary time to travel on the road.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and one of my biggest cons is that I miss my tools, man. Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
always liked building stuff, working with my hands, but sorry, but that's the heaviest thing you have that you probably can use the least often. And so
yeah,
all I've got around is just stuff for basic tune-ups and for taking care of the motorcycle, and that's about all I'm allowed. So I think I'm living I actually, as I think about it, am living totally vicariously through a lot of my podcast guests. Like I realize that I've got you on the show. I've had a welder and metal worker on the show, and a woodworker, and it's just like I think I'm just jealous of all of you having a shop and
yeah.
tools. That's really what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, the two things don't really go together. So
Nah.
you guys really downsized and to be mobile. Is that what you did?
Yeah, we took so okay, we left in August of 2019 and we
Right.
started selling our stuff in about February or March of 2019.
Yeah.
So we took and we were just in a one bedroom apartment in Denver. That was it.
Okay. All
And
right.
somehow we still had so much stuff. And I think you don't realize how much you accumulate when you stay
Oh
in one
yeah.
spot like that.
Oh yeah.
It's just absolutely wild how much that changes. And
Yeah.
so we just spent a lot of time on eBay and going to a flea market and just get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it. To be honest, I feel better. Like it's nice to feel what that minimalist life feels like.
Oh
But then
yeah.
there are some times where it can be really hard. Like if there's something I want to do or try, there's I have to justify having the space for whatever that is. And I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
as a guy, we like our toys. We want the next like cool thing to play with, and if I don't have the space for it, I can never even kind of go for it. That's a pretty
Yeah.
regular struggle.
Yeah.
Um,
It's kind of a downside, I guess, or maybe not, maybe that's not the right word, but it's one of the challenges of being a jack of all trades for me is that I have a metal shop, a wood shop, all kinds of different kind of fabrication tools. And when I was working as a contractor for the last couple of years, it means traveling with just so much stuff. To be able
mhm.
to do a job that involves carpentry, electrical work, plumbing, and maybe something else. It just means that you just have this massive truck and trailer just loaded with stuff to be able to do a few jobs. And I think that part of me that admires the specialist is a little bit jealous of the person who just has, the like one set of tools and specialty kind of surrounding those tools, and isn't just like a hoarded out person with so many different things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. How did you? Okay, so I think that you're touching on something that I was really interested in, which is I think there's a tie-in here. Bear with me
Yeah, yeah.
because I watched a video of you had put up of some gardening that you were doing, and you were kind of using that as an opportunity to talk about some of like the value of working, just
Oh
the
yeah.
value that you get out of doing work,
Yeah.
and it's exactly related to this conversation about specialists. Because if you think about the way that most people live, and most everyone lives now, is we all specialize in something in order to you know, collect money to purchase things from other people who specialize in that thing.
Hmm.
And obviously, that's sort of just macroeconomics. That's how it works. It is more
Yeah.
efficient to live like that. But for someone who wants to have the experience of doing a million different things and becoming, more self-sufficient, you end up putting a lot more of your time towards a ton of different projects.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that seems like something that draws you in to me, and it does to me too. So I can kind of relate to that.
Yeah.
Um, what is it specifically that sort of got you to that point?
Well, I think I mean, just hearing you talk, I think about a lot of things. One is that I feel like we live in a culture, at least the one surrounding me, that has so many time-saving devices and labor-saving devices. And those things are awesome. Like, I'm not saying I want to be washing all my clothes by hand or anything like that. But some of those devices and that whole like way of thinking, it gets us so disconnected with labor that can be like really valuable, like really just kind of rewarding. And I always think back to like when I'm out working these days, I think back to some of the jobs I had as a kid, which were, like I'd have a shovel and my job was to dig a hole, just like really simple, basic, low skill stuff. And I still find so much value in that kind of work. Like really not complicated, simple stuff involving a shovel or just like one or two tools. And I find that when I get back to that kind of work ethic and that kind of work and have a good day of that kind of stuff, I just find it really valuable. Like it frees up my mind and I feel good physically and I get something done. Um, but I also, make very little money and don't get as much done as the next guy who's got, like a huge truck or a machine or something like that. So anyway, I just think about that a lot, and I do deeply value the hand tool or the just direct contact, like working with my hands. At the same time, like, uh, I think early on when you were talking, I was thinking about how it is so it's so hard to walk away from money and like financial opportunity, and I've done that a few times over the years, and usually found it to be really hard, like physically challenging or emotionally or financially challenging, but also really rewarding. And that switch I was talking about earlier of quitting my professor job, I mean that was kind of nuts, like to quit a job where you make a lot of money and you've got benefits, and it was kind of a part-time job, like you don't work summers, even during the week you can flex your hours and all that kind of stuff. To quit that job and to start a business which is like nothing but sweat labor was kind of kooky, but at the same time, like just been so I've just been so into it. It's just been really cool to do something new and to be like directly responsible based on the work I do in a day. You know, Let me say it a different way. Based on the work I do in a day, I get to see exactly the rewards of that labor, like
Yeah,
very directly. It's not
yeah,
indirect. It's not abstract. It's not like, well, I wrote a book, but the book didn't sell, but it doesn't matter because it got me tenure. And like the confusion of my labor as a professor was profound, and I feel like that's just not the case now. Like you saw that video, I took down that tree, and that was an experience I had with like a buddy of mine. It was interesting. I learned from it. We got it done in a day. There's a certain amount of money at the end of the day that seemed fair to the people I was charging, and that was it. It was just like a really
Yeah.
straightforward job.
Right, right. The whole thing interests me a whole lot. It's like you couldn't be a better podcast guest for my brain at this moment, because I continually think about this. I feel like someone who is just like all of us, really torn between um, two different versions of the world. I mean, ultimately, we're just monkeys who ended up with better and better tools, so
Yeah.
good that we sort of aren't sure if we're monkeys anymore, and it's quite confusing to be there. It's almost like you got to stop it. It's like I'm thinking of those, those like T-shirts where they've got sort of the evolution, primate to human, and then
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the last step is always something stupid. It's like someone like
Right.
shrugged over a video game or something,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's like there at some point there is a place to stop, right? Like there has to be a place to stop where we can
Yeah.
be like the pinnacle of humanness is not necessarily to go on to that next step. It may be somewhere back a step from what we are possible, what we are capable of doing,
Yeah.
because it's just better to just stay human. I don't know. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
crazy for kind of feeling that way, but there's um there's a great book that I love. It's called Shop Class of Soulcraft. That it really discusses this concept of how we have moved away from being able to take one job and accomplish it and do it and see the end result of that. And now it's just so ethereal to us in this world we live in, where you're sending emails all day and you're not seeing what it was that you accomplished, as opposed
Yeah.
to when you remove that tree stump and the tree stump is gone. That's very
Yeah.
material. Um,
I feel like this
yeah,
pandemic, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like this pandemic has made us question some of the things that we have taken for granted.
me too.
Just the fundamental things of like gathering indoors with other people, or going. I mean, people say like going to a restaurant, institutions like schools and workplaces, like all kinds of workplaces. Seems like they've been transformed. They'll probably continue to be transformed in ways that just allow us to be healthy or to not spread this disease around or the next disease, the one after that or whatever. And it's kind of cool when we get the opportunity to rethink the things we take for granted, even though this whole thing sucks. Like I'm not saying it's great or anything, but I think the opportunity to rethink like schools and how we teach our kids, or how we learn ourselves and why we do it the way we do it. And the same things about workplaces. Like, why do we all sit in big rooms and buildings to get our jobs done? It seems like kind of an opportunity.
I'm with you. I have been silver lining this whole thing since it started, on multiple episodes, because I'm continually thinking about, and I even think it's not even bad to. Okay, again, I feel like
Yeah,
I need to throw out there that some people are having a way harder time than me, and I've got
yeah,
a lot. I have a ton of privilege
big
for the
time.
way I get
Yeah,
to live.
yeah,
100%. At the same time, I'm glad for the person who hasn't had the chance to experience what it's like to work from home, which I've been doing since I started working.
right.
Um, who hasn't ever had that chance and then comes home and realizes there is a way to be with your family all day and reconnect with that side of yourself
Yeah, yeah,
and get that work done and be productive and contribute. I think I am very hopeful that that could change some people's lives in a positive way, and
yeah,
that's about all I can focus on, because I am a silver linings guy. I gotta look for something good to come out of the whole thing.
yeah, yeah,
And I think more people are spending time outside, because that's the place you can go right now. That's safe. I know I can be 6 feet away from people if I
yeah,
go for a jog in that park.
definitely.
So I have a lot of hope kind of about this moment for people. Um, and I even see, like, going to the farmers market. I feel like some people wouldn't have considered that, but local farms still have all their food, even though the supermarket is
Yeah,
stuck in this sort of mass agriculture chain, and they're running out of meat.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah,
so I'm trying to really really focus on some of those positives, because otherwise
yeah,
it's too difficult to watch this thing unfurl and watch
yeah.
this second wave thing happening and just feel like hopeless about it.
Yeah. And like you
Um,
said, it's not the same for everyone. I mean, a lot of people don't have
yeah,
the same kinds of opportunities, but everyone is facing changes. I mean, it's just there's alterations in the social fabric everywhere.
yeah. there's mass changes to the way we're gonna think about our day
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
forward here.
Yeah, exactly.
I think some of those companies who from the very start of, like, I think it wasn't it Twitter who fairly early on in this said, you know what,
Yeah.
we're switching. You're all working from home now,
Yeah. They're
uh,
like, forget it.
permanently. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that they probably saved themselves a lot of money not waiting to see how this panned out, because it was going to be a
Exactly.
lot longer than anybody really knew.
Yeah, the
Um,
idea of waiting to go back to what it was seems to be a fallacy that's becoming more and more apparent. You
yeah,
know, you just can't wait to go back to what we had because it's not coming back.
yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
seem like it.
It does, it does scare me that the non silver line inside of me, though, it thinks about that this is also an opportunity for more processes to be automated,
Yeah.
while workers are gone, and
Oh yeah.
the jobs that are going to just be lost and just not exist anymore. I definitely feel that. I feel that for people.
Yeah.
That's no good. And
Oh
we
yeah.
felt it too. I mean, our main job doing marketing is to travel and film with people, and that has been canceled, postponed, a lot of things off the table, because that's not something that we could do a lot of the time. So,
Right. Right.
hey, I feel the sting, everybody too. I get it. It's let's just hope for things to get better as they move forward, and I believe they will, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure, we start to recognize what the challenge is and how we can deal with it, and we know
Yeah.
more about this virus than we knew at the beginning,
Yeah. Become
and
accustomed to it and adapt.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
pretty good at adapting.
You've got kind of a particular. Is there like an extra layer on this? You mentioned some of your health issues before. I don't know how deep you want to go, so stop me if I'm
No,
cutting
I'm
lines
cool talking
here.
about this stuff. Yeah.
You made a video. I watched your video kind of about your MS story,
Right.
and
Right.
dealing with multiple sclerosis, and it's it's a very scary thing, especially to hear someone like you, who's clearly in good health, a very responsible about your health kind of person, say this
Yeah.
happened in my late 20s and it just happened. Woof,
Yeah.
that's that's hard to hear.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry you got to go through that, man. But
Oh yeah.
is there an extra layer on top of that? Worrying about COVID, like, does it affect that's like an? Am I wrong in saying that's an autoimmune
Yeah,
issue?
straight up. It's one of those things where
Yeah,
a new disease comes around, like
yeah,
this COVID thing, and you're reading about it, and you're looking at the high risk groups, and it's like, as long as you're not immunocompromised,
right.
and you're like, wait a minute, but I am immunocompromised. But there's not any really great comprehensive research yet about how this particular virus affects people with multiple sclerosis. So I mean, there's like one study out that makes it seem like it's pretty much people with MS suffer in the same ways. Like if you're overweight, if you're a dude, if you have other pre-existing conditions, you're in trouble if you have MS,
Mm-hmm.
just like everyone else. But yeah, I mean, personally, uh, I've had MS a long time. I've had MS like 20 something years, and I was diagnosed really late in the game. I kind of struggled with it for like 15, 16, 17 years before I finally got diagnosed. And it's a wicked disease. It's really debilitating. And I've been really fortunate. And I don't know exactly why. I mean, I can kind of speculate, but I've been really fortunate. I've got some disabilities, but nothing too bad. Like I can still do physical stuff, and I've still got most of my marbles, and I really do pretty well. I jumped on board an anti-inflammatory diet protocol early on,
Mm-hmm.
when I got diagnosed. I read a few books, and all the books I was reading were kind of like about alternative ways to treat the disease without taking meds. And I really didn't want to take any medications because the medications had like all these side effects, or some of them had side effects. So anyway, I jumped on this anti-inflammatory diet protocol, which at the time seemed really hard to do, but now it's just like second nature. I've been doing it like 5 years, and my MS has been chilled out, like really chilled out. I haven't been having exacerbations, which is kind of how that disease works. Is like you get these nasty flare ups, and you lose feeling in part of your body or mobility or whatever. So I've been doing really well, but with this COVID thing going around, I've definitely been hyper vigilant about trying not to get it, and I've been getting a lot of support from my family in the same way. People just kind of people close to me doing extra things to try to not bring it into the house. And that's just kind of based on speculation, like just
Yeah.
speculating that it would be bad news if I got it. But you just don't know. You don't know how these statistics are. Like you look at them, and you're like, oh, 95% go this way, 5% go that way.
Right.
And, everyone has something that makes them vulnerable, which is just being human. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's these 20-year-old, 2-year-old kids who are like, seem to be healthy and they're getting hit by the disease, but
Right.
obviously that's not the norm. So
Right.
yeah, it's been a big part of the pandemic for me is having to kind of navigate it um, based on my own personal issues with having MS. And
Yeah.
then I was also my the business I was building was kind of like a handyman contractor job, which was all about going to people's houses. That's all I did every day. Got in people's houses, like renovated their bathrooms. Like it was really an intimate kind of thing with people and families,
Hmm.
and that just stopped. Like that business just stopped cold when this disease started going around, in part because I didn't want to do it anymore, and in part because people stopped calling.
Yeah.
Like nobody wanted some stranger to come in their house and fix their, kitchen up or, tear out a wall or anything like that. So that's why I shifted to try to make money doing these outside jobs.
Yeah, well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I really thought it was cool, hearing you talk about how you were considering kind of medication versus taking this more kind of natural route through this. I think, Andrea and I both are, we've worked in the natural health industry for so long that
Yeah,
for us, this has become a decision we've made of very, very much staying away um, from kind of the allopathic path when we can. And I also
yeah,
recognize that there are some great things that have come out of Western medicine, but when we can, we do our best to make
yep,
it about make it about
yep,
diet, make it about exercise, make it about getting sunshine, like really focusing on those things as opposed to um, jumping in with
yeah,
medication.
yeah,
And I know it's kind of a hot topic in the MS world, which way to go with this. And there's obviously
yeah.
success stories on both sides.
Yep, yep. And I try to respect. I put up a video, whatever it was, like 5 years ago about my MS story, and I've continued to kind of be involved with some online groups, and I have another YouTube channel about my experiences with MS, and I've tried to really uh, respect respect people's decisions. Like some people take medication, and I understand that, and they're doing well or they're struggling or whatever. And other people take more of a holistic diet, low stress kind of approach, and they struggle or they do well. Like there's no great solution when you've got an autoimmune disease that tends to tends to result in you being disabled in one way or another. But I do think that there's like a common thread through a lot of approaches to things like heart disease and multiple sclerosis and high blood pressure and diabetes. There's kind of a common thread of like eat whole foods
Yeah.
and diminish your fat intake and lower your BMI and that kind of thing seems to help
Yeah,
in
mold
one way
is
or
one of the
another.
things I keep hearing about too, like staying away from mold, and apparently that
Yeah,
has
yeah,
brought this about in some people, which is pretty scary because obviously we don't ever know where the
yep,
mold is that we
yep,
could be breathing in.
yeah,
Um,
totally.
is MS something? Everybody's gonna have to just forgive my ignorance on this one, but hopefully someone else is asking this question. Is MS something that is 100% curable at some point, or is it always kind of something that's around and it's just a matter of the symptoms being present or not?
Yeah, the way it works is that it's kind of like a breach in the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier keeps your spinal and brain fluid like kind of nice and pure from the other stuff in your blood. So you end up with this breach in the blood-brain barrier, and your central nervous system gets kind of chewed up by your immune system. So you end up with these big kind of lesions like sores and scabs on your brain and your spinal cord. And it has never been described as curable. Like it's never been described that way. It's just a progressive disease. So
Mm-hmm.
you get one lesion, then you get another, and next thing you know, you can't walk or you can't think straight or you can't go to the bathroom like you used to, that kind of thing. That's like the typical disease progression. But if you track the narratives about MS, not everyone follows the same progression of that steady decline. So it does in some people's description, it's kind of curable. Like you can live a full, happy, healthy life without too many problems, depending on what you're doing. Maybe you have a mild case of the disease, maybe you're on the right medication, or maybe you're following the right diet and vitamin protocol. And like I'm just about 50 years old. I'm doing great. There's people in their 60s and 70s. They're doing really well. So I don't think anyone would call it like a cure, but at the same time, it seems pretty damn good to me. you
Yeah,
know?
I totally get that. It's
Yeah.
one of the things I always kind of look at is like history with this kind of thing. Like I don't know if you get much
Yep.
into the history of, because I'm sure it's a matter of we diagnose it now, we know more about what it is, and so it's
Totally.
hard to look at the history and say if we were diagnosing it correctly, early.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but I always wonder if there's more of a trend of this of autoimmune diseases specifically happening, um, just more now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always wonder about that when it comes to, because we're
Oh
eating some
yeah.
strange things and we're not
Oh man.
outside as much as we ought to
Yep.
be, and
Environmental toxins and
yeah,
all the stuff at the grocery store that's bad for you and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
yeah, that's one of those areas that I'm actually genuinely proud of, by the way, because of all the things I've had to give up in the RV life,
Yeah.
like not being able to have my tools and do everything for myself, because I love being self-sufficient. Like if I can dive into something and just
Right.
do everything for myself, I love it. And cooking has been one of those things. So like
Oh
I
yeah.
am really, like, I cook every meal for us, and we do our best to only eat real actual
Oh, that's
foods, and we
awesome.
stare at
Yeah.
ingredient lists, and we're very much on that train. So that's, luckily in the RV life, that's one of the things I get to do,
That's awesome.
which is pretty
Yeah, I
cool.
know a lot of people on the road, like, living in a van or an RV or out of their car or whatever. That's kind of the thing they always wonder about. Like, how do you cook? What do you eat? But I know, like, having lived out of my car in the past, usually just for a few months at a time, you figure out a kind of protocol and a way to do things.
Yeah,
And once you get it dialed in, it can be really great,
I
you know?
mean, hey, I've got a stove that runs on gas, which I've never had a gas stove before. You
Yeah,
don't get
there you
that
go.
in
There you go.
standard apartments. That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
quite small. My oven is very small, but then I do a lot of stuff with fermentation, which all that takes really is some pantry space.
That's
So,
great. Yeah.
like my sourdough, I just have to have flour around, and I can pretty much go and do whatever I need. So I think that's another plug for just sort of how great RV life is too, compared to getting
Yeah.
in a van,
Yeah.
is that I've got the room to cook real food for
Oh
sure.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And some of those rigs even have outdoor kitchens, which are pretty cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I like those.
I've got a stove, just a camping stove that works totally fine for that.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's that at least is one of those things that I can control. Is the Okay? So I just realized something. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
gonna ask you about Meta Spencer, like what the name means, and I realize it also is an acronym MS. Is
Yo,
that purposeful?
that is just a coincidence.
Okay.
This was kind of like back in the 90s. I sort of discovered HTML, and the fact that you could create a website was so exciting. It was just, and I started creating websites, like 1999, somewhere in there. And I was making furniture at the time, so I made like a furniture building website. And like the six other people on the planet who had furniture building websites, we all linked to each other, and it was really exciting. And at that point, I just grabbed a handle, just like a name to use for my stuff online. It was Meta Spencer. I had metaspencer.com for a long time, and it was just it was just an avatar or whatever. And then as I developed uh, on YouTube, which is kind of like one of my revenue streams right now, and also just like my one of my big creative outlets, I just use that name. It just kind of stuck with me,
Right.
And I think for a long time, and you'd be the guy to know about this. For a long time, I thought a lot about branding. Oh, you got to brand appropriately, and this is always weird. Like every time I talk to someone, they're like, "Meta Spencer? Like what is that? Did you say, is that two words or one? It doesn't really click with people. But at the same time, whatever. I just roll with it. I've
Yeah.
got it on my truck, and I've got it on. It's like the name of my business, and it just works. But it
I
doesn't have any really big significance anymore.
I honestly really encourage people to drop significance when it comes to branding. Like it does not matter.
That's
Just
funny.
pick like I don't know. Name any Fortune 500 company. It's like what does it mean? Like like
Yeah, right,
it
right.
doesn't really mean anything. It's you know it because they produce a great product and
They
because they
do good
produce
work. Yeah,
content around that
yeah,
product. That's why you
yeah,
know it.
yeah.
Um, People have farmers insurance who are not farmers. Like it's not
Right, right, right.
like
That's good to hear. Yeah.
my company's called Marketing Tea, and that was just because I liked tea and I love tea, and
Right,
so there you
right.
go. And it doesn't matter anymore because people know it, and because
Yeah, yeah,
we make things and we
yeah.
do good work, and
I
that's
realized
it.
that when I was looking you up, I thought, oh, he's like a tea distributor because I worked for Celestial
Sure.
Seasonings like a long time ago, and then within 2 seconds I realized that it was just kind of an inroad into a bigger thing that you do, and I forgot about the tea real quick.
Yeah.
So it's I totally agree. You do good work. People get to know who you are, and I had
Right.
thought about changing my brand, my logo, all that stuff, but it's like, whatever. I don't want to like
Yeah.
confuse anything. I'll just keep going with it.
I people get quite picky with me about their branding, and we'll spend a long time on color palettes and fonts
Right,
and
right.
logos. And I at the end of the day, I'm like the time we're spending doing this, we could have made like five videos and put them out, like
Yeah.
gotten
Get
attention.
something done. Yeah, get something done.
Yeah, that's kind of where I stand. I'm pretty no
Yeah,
nonsense when it comes to the marketing of just
that's
like
cool.
just be you. And I also encourage a lot of people to brand around their name. I just think because that's the one thing that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess it changes for some people sometimes, but often does not change. And so if anything under the umbrella of your name is going to be totally fine.
Right.
It's and it
Nice.
just doesn't matter. So you've done well. You
Like
did
good.
well.
So this ended up being like a little marketing consultation,
I think that's
and
great.
I'm feeling like I'm doing all right.
Yeah. Well, I think that the meta thing works too. You know, I've seen you talk in meta layers about the
Right,
things that
right.
you do. I mean, we've done
Yeah,
that this whole podcast. It's
yeah,
about
yeah.
it's not a I haven't asked you about like how to hoe a garden. Like
Right.
we
Yeah.
all kind of know how to do that. If you're in the Midwest, at least you know how to do that.
Oh, you better.
Um, and but it's more about like what does that give you? So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's you're doing good there, sir. You're all right on that one.
Good to know.
Yeah,
Good to
and
know.
I saw it's the other thing I was gonna mention that I'm so jealous of is your home gym. Like if it was not COVID right now, I'd have to come
Yeah,
check out that home gym of yours because
yeah,
you have built an awesome space.
yeah.
For people who have not seen it like I have, can you kind of talk about all the different things that you put in there?
Yeah, that was actually that was at our previous house. So that guy is now inhabited by some other people. But I've
Lucky
built,
folks.
yeah, yeah. And that was one of those builds where we bought this house. It was like an 1890s house, and it had a kind of like a huge open gambrel roof dealio, and it was just kind of calling out to be a workout space. Like the space kind of dictated what we did with it. We tried it as a bedroom. We used it for like ping pong for a while, and it was like, let's just make a gym. And at the same time, it was kind of at the same time that we had been going to the gym, like Cardinal Fitness or some gym in town, and just finding that to be just like a bankrupt experience. You just show up and there's all these machines you interact with, and you got to drive there to go there and everything. So at that point, it didn't take long really to just create a kind of fun, playful space that was half kind of climbing gym, a place to dance and do karate stuff. My wife is like a karate kind of person,
That's
and
awesome.
then also like put some weights in there and some climbing ropes and things like that. So I really believe in that. I think it's so cool. I've built climbing gyms for people now in their garages, and right now I'm working on an outdoor gym that I'm making a video about that is kind of built on the back of my workshop. And I just think that's the way to go. Like if you're into working out and you like to go somewhere special and pay a fee, that's fine. But I think there are just so many cool creative things you can do with movement in a homemade gym that are outside the box of the cookie cutter gym. So
Oh,
that was a fun one.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think about just gyms in general. I had to give up my gym life, my gym rat life, when we got on the road because it just
Yep.
didn't make sense anymore.
Sure.
Um, and I lost so much progress for a while, but
Oh
then
yeah.
I realized that like, hey, if you do enough push-ups in a day, like you'll actually be okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's all about just like the running and body weight and different things. And that's the one thing I haven't gotten yet is sort of the ability to like hang and climb. Like
Oh, you'll get
that
there.
kills me.
You gotta just be
Um,
consistent, just a little bit every day.
yeah,
That's the hard
yeah,
part, but just a
exactly.
little bit every day. And if you build it into your space, I think you're more likely to do it. I mean, I guess you could walk by that Cinnabar, that set of rings every day and not do anything, but it's tempting to just hang from it for a few seconds.
Yeah, there's a good case to be made for literally just doing that to like decompress your
Yeah,
spine
yeah,
and build up your forearm strength. I've heard all these
totally.
crazy stats about how literally like your grip strength correlates not causation here, but correlates to like how long you will live, and it just is an
Yeah,
indicator that you're
yeah,
doing. And I feel like you've locked onto the things that are very that make a lot of sense for humans to stay in shape. Like, what would we be doing? We'd be probably climbing around some trees a little bit. We'd be doing some walking, some running. I'm sure you do plenty of walking when you're out there working, and
oh
also
yeah.
just sort of manual labor of like whether that's farming or building something like that. That's a workout. Like the whole day's the workout when you're doing it
Just
like
move it,
that.
yeah, yeah. Just to
You're
keep, for me it goes back to having MS a bit. That MS is a potentially debilitating disease that kind of gets you, if it progresses in the wrong way, it gets you to the point where you lack the ability to move. And so I've kind of worked really hard to move every day, like to walk every day and to just involve myself in a lot of different movements, which is kind of like a spiritual journey. I'm not saying I'm like curing MS because I'm out walking or I'm hanging or climbing or whatever, but it's been a way for me to just try to stay alive and keep moving and just to appreciate how awesome it is to be able to do things, especially when you're kind of strapped with the potential of not being able to do them at some point.
Yeah, 100%. Like just being very present and making sure you're doing the things you can do at all times. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there's you know what, actually it makes me kind of sad because I think about people who end up in accidents and things
Oh
or even
yeah,
have debilitating disease, and it's like, man, I wish I'd just spent a little more time doing stuff while that was accessible.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
it's worth doing. It's worth getting out every day to make sure that you're not missing out on what it is to just be a human and to be able to
yeah,
move in the amazing ways that we can manipulate space around us.
yeah.
It's just incredible.
That's really well
um,
said. Yeah.
and you're out there doing it every day. You're not just manipulating space, you're also like building awesome shit all the time.
Yeah.
That's
I
super cool.
try. I just love it. There's just something so rewarding for me about having something tangible that comes out of my labor. And if I'm making something each day, I'm usually going home pretty happy.
It's the end of the movie Office Space when he's happier as a construction worker. Do you know this
I
movie?
don't know. I
Oh,
haven't seen it.
classic.
Is that how
Yeah.
that ends? So it's an office guy who ends up a construction worker?
Well, not to spoil the ending for anybody,
Okay,
but it has been
okay.
out for 30 years or so now.
I think
Uh,
it's all right. Yeah.
but no, yeah, I mean it's a dude who's upset with his cubicle life, and through a series of rather humorous events, he ends up um,
Yeah.
at the end of it realizing that he's just a happier becoming a construction worker. He gets to be
Yeah.
outside and work
Yeah.
with his hands and just connect to something material, and I think that's something we could all use a little bit more of.
I'll have to check
Um,
it out. If it's been out 30 years, I think it's okay for me to check it out.
Yeah, yeah, probably at this point, it's got that mainstream acceptance. You can kind of
Right, right, right.
jump in. In fact, it's retro again now, so you can still kind of keep the hipster badge and go
There you
watch
go.
it because
Okay,
it's
good.
a little retro.
I need that.
Um, so you mentioned you've got a farm now. Do you guys have the garden going, or any animals, or what do you
Yeah, we've
have
got
coming on right now?
we have kind of a rotating flock of sheep. We have a friend who's got sheep. She's got a big herd, and she sends over like about a dozen sheep each summer to pasture on our farm, and that's just awesome. My wife is really into knitting and like fiber arts, and she makes yarn and that kind of stuff. And she has a YouTube channel, knitting the stash, where she's just like a big fiber person. So she's into sheep. She does that, and they mow the grass, so I don't have to mow the grass. It's great. And then we've got chickens, somewhere between like 20 and 100 chickens at any one time, depending on what we're
Wow.
doing. And a big old garden. And we're trying to also build more, like a bigger orchard and more berries and things like that. But that's been kind of taking us time, like planting more fruit trees doesn't mean you have fruit that year. So that's been taking a little bit of time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah,
Do you sell at any farmers market? Like, how can I get my hands on some of
we
that farm
don't
food?
we don't sell anything at the farmers market. I think we might get there at some point, but currently when we have excess eggs, we give them away. There's a kind of local network. We don't give them to a food bank, but we kind of have a friend or a friend of a friend who does a local network for some people in need here in the community. So we'll give eggs away to those guys. Sometimes I'll trade a chicken. If I slaughter chickens, I'll trade a chicken with people for something else or just give one away. So we're not at the point of doing the farmer's market. I think we may at some point or start a CSA or something, but we're just not quite at that scale. Again, it's a jack of all trades. I'm too busy doing like
Yeah,
10 other things.
right. Yeah, can't go all in on one thing. Got to make sure
Yeah,
you got 20. Uh,
exactly.
I need to bribe you with like I need to bake you some sourdough bread and maybe see if I can get my hands on something because
There you go.
yeah,
Hey man, you're
it's a little
welcome to
trade.
have a couple dozen eggs or whatever we have around.
Andrew would love that for sure. So I'll
No
hit you up
problem.
about that. And I'm always willing to bake bread for people. I do that for people anyways because
Yeah.
I love people getting to enjoy like good sourdough. Like because I
Yeah.
think the bread I make is way different than like the sourdough you get from Whole Foods or Panera or whatever.
Oh
Like
yeah. Oh yeah.
it's just how I make mine. It's a lot less sour. It's way more like a really just meaty white bread. So
Nice. Have
I'll
you
have to
noticed that it's been
hit you up.
changing as you move around?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, and
Yeah.
honestly it's infuriating.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it bakes differently. You know what my real issue is though? My real beef, and I talked about this on a previous episode with some sourdough bakers, is that my oven is propane, but the flames come up only from the bottom.
Oh
So
yeah.
when
Yeah.
I'm trying to cook bread, usually it's just sort of like, okay, you're just gonna have the bottom of this is just gonna be burnt,
Yep.
whatever. So when you
Yep.
slice it, just cut off the bottom. That's how it's
Yep.
gonna go. Otherwise, there's no way to bake it through.
Yeah.
That I need to find a
Well,
way.
maybe you can. I've dealt with that by putting it in a Dutch oven, like one of those big old
I do that, and it
cast iron.
still
It still
burns.
does it. Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because it's
All
just
right.
like it's so tall that it's basically direct flame right on the bottom of that
I
Dutch
see
oven
what
the
you
whole
mean.
time. There's
Yeah.
no
Okay.
getting around it.
Yeah.
One day I'll find a solution, or maybe I'll like pioneer the RV solution to this, like
You'll
for
figure something out.
people who like to RV but also bake bread and need a better bread oven. That's a possible career future for me for sure.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, it's a good life. It's good stuff.
Sounds
So
good.
tell people where they can find you so they can go check out the cool stuff you're doing.
Yeah, you can pretty much just search the webs for Meta Spencer, Metaspencer, and you'll stumble into my stuff. Mostly on YouTube, but like everybody else, on the Instagram and the Facebook, MySpace, whatever it is these days. But yeah, mainly on YouTube. That's like my main focus.
Yep, and you've got a good following on there. Got a lot of subscribers I
Yeah,
saw,
I
so
love
that's
it. It's
pretty
so
awesome.
much fun. I'm sort of a cynic about the web sometimes, but I just love YouTube. I think it's good. I just think it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a little bit right there with you, but I also do it a lot for work. So
Okay.
it's one of those things we think about, and maybe there's a future here. Not to give anything away, but maybe there's a future where we're doing some of our RV and stuff on YouTube for everybody.
Yeah. Nice.
We'll see where that goes. I don't want to give away too much,
Yeah.
but yeah. So I'll have to again, just like I was doing for everyone on former remote episodes, I'll take some sort of creative picture of some sort and post that with the episode. So go check it out. Find Spencer at Metaspencer and find me as always at THicksonLife on Instagram and also on Twitter at THicksonLife. And go check out some of the cool stuff that he's doing because I think it's really awesome. I'm looking forward to when we get to hang out for real and this whole thing's kind of passed and
Yeah.
we get to I don't know, maybe we'll build something or something so I can get my hands dirty for once and like have a tool in my hand for God's sake for a minute. Like use a drill or a saw. So all right, thank you so much, Spencer, for being on the show, and thanks to everyone for listening to another episode of Strangers Worth Meeting. And as always, we will see you on the next episode.